Welcome to the LSI Behind the Wind podcast. My name is Sean Slatter, and for 30 years, I've dedicated my life to the science of business development. I've seen the impact of our work, which has evolved into economic development and now social impact. In this episode, I have structured the format a little differently. The background on this episode is that during the months of April and into May, I spent 2 weeks in Greenland, and during those 2 weeks, had the opportunity to see a lot of the backcountry of Greenland. And I spent time with some amazing mountaineering guides that took us into areas of Greenland that may have never been seen by humans before. And I really learned a lot. I'd had so many of members of our team and our clients and individuals had heard that I was doing this trek into the backcountry of Greenland, and which was a trip that had been in the works for 20 years and had been rescheduled several times due to COVID over the last 2 years. And it finally, the stars aligned, and I did this 2-week trip into Greenland. This trip was, as you'll hear in my discussion with Summer Green, who facilitated this episode with me and had really helped me put together the details of this trip. So she knew a lot of the preparation, and she had been working with this group for 2 years to make this happen, and had worked around my very challenging schedule to carve out this time for me to go and do this trip. So she knew some of the details, but had so many questions about what had happened on during those 2 weeks, and some of the things that I had accomplished. And so she had prepared these questions for this episode. And it was really just this episode, as you'll see, is a dialogue between Summer and me. But what I wanted to convey, and how does this relate to business development and the work that we're doing with our clients? It really was, for me, a transformational experience, as you'll hear in our conversation. It was so challenging physically, and this experience really challenged all of my abilities as a skier, which has been a significant focus in my life as a longtime avid skier, and have really thought I had pushed myself to some of my limits of skiing. This trip really challenged my physical ability, my skills as a skier. You'll hear me talk about some of the mountaineering, which I was completely unprepared for, challenged my courage. And it was a solid 2 weeks of preparing and shifting as things changed during the course of the day. And sometimes things would change in a minute, and we would have to shift focus and readjust our plan. During this 2-week period, what I found and why this was so transformational for me was it really helped me understand some of and connect the dots, some of the things that we do in our business. And I think that some of the lessons, life lessons that I had learned, you'll hear me discuss with Summer. And she brings up a lot of just really great questions that I'm able to incorporate into our work. There was so much planning. There was so much training. And then even when I got there, there was a strategy and a plan, and we would set off and trying to follow this plan. And as things changed, in a minute, as I said, we would have to oftentimes change that plan. And it taught me a lot about the importance of preparing and building good strategy, but then being able to shift as you need to and not just hold on to a plan that's not working. And I think we see this oftentimes in our business and in life and I see this with a lot of strategists, that they're so wed to their plan, to their strategy, that they won't allow for, and when external factors influence the plan, that you need to shift. And it taught me a lot about adversity. It taught me a lot about focus, and that being honest with the team about what's going on, how each member of the team is so critical to the success of the group. There were many times during this 2 weeks that experience really was about working together in concert to make this happen. And when our guide, Rick, would shift focus, he expected the rest of the group to change with him and trust him. And there was a lot of lessons I learned working with this incredible guide who took us to these multi-summits every day, and in very dangerous conditions. Skiing for the last 30 years, I've never skied such steep terrain. I've never skied these lines that have really challenged my ability to stay on the mountain as I did over this 2-week trek into the back country of Greenland. So I hope you enjoy this very different format, different conversation between Summer and me. And I hope you can connect the dots on some of the things that we have tried to incorporate into the company and in our work, building strategies for our clients, building capture plans and campaigns, and how critical it is to be constantly assessing the strategy and the plan and determining if this is working or not. And really has been the basis, I believe, of our success for the last 50 years, is that if we were doing the same thing that the company was doing even 5 years ago, we wouldn't have survived. And we've been able to assess the needs of our clients, the needs of the market, and fill those needs in what we call solution development. So I hope you enjoy this conversation that I had with Summer. It was actually recorded over a few different sessions, so you may hear some differences in the audio, and that's why. But this was such an incredible experience, and I hope you find it valuable as well. Hey, thanks for doing this with me. I know that a lot of people in the organization and outside of the organization have had questions about this trip that I took to Greenland. And so thanks for doing this dialogue with me. We thought that I would tell this story and you could ask questions on some of the things that have happened. And really, since I've been back, you and I have not had a lot of time to talk about the details of what happened in Greenland. And I think this will be an interesting discussion. So appreciate you joining me for this session.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm excited for this. I think it will be a fun podcast for us.
I do too. I think it'll be interesting. So I really, I appreciated all of your help in making this trip happen. You were really instrumental in helping me make all of the logistical arrangements, which was one of the most challenging trips I've ever done. But what kind of questions do you have as we start this dialogue?
Yeah, I want to start by maybe, I know that most of our listeners probably know you professionally, but maybe don't know you, personally. But maybe some of our people I know that listen do know your passion, your love for skiing, and you're like wanting to always seek high adventure kind of ski trips. And so maybe we can start by you telling us a little bit about why you picked Greenland, why that was something you've always wanted to do, and maybe give us some insight into what it was about Greenland that propelled you into planning this trip.
That's a great place to start. It was, it's always been on my list for 20 years of one of the places that I wanted to go ski. And this started as a result of a conversation that I had with a friend of mine, Rick Forster, that had been for years studying the snowpack in Greenland. And he'd been looking at some of the cultural impact of Greenland. And so he knew me. He knew what kind of skiing I loved. And he said, you need to go to Greenland. This place has some of the most incredible skiing in the world. And he told me these stories of these mountains and how the snow is just incredible. And there's very few avalanches that happen in Greenland because the weather is so constant year round. And so I'd always had this on my list and thought at some point that I'd put this together. And then, as you know, we had been trying to put this trip together for a couple of years, and with COVID and everything else, it just kept getting pushed out. And then you remember that these guides came back to us probably in November and said, okay, this is going to happen, and it's going to happen in May of 2022. And so we had been anticipating this for a couple of years, but we really started pushing hard after November.
Yeah, and I do, I work really closely with Cassie at Hess, and I owe a lot of the credit to her because she's so well connected with some of these companies. But she's the one that kind of came back and said, they have one spot open on this May trip. Do you want to go? And I remember we were, yes, and then it was so busy planning it from there.
Oh my goodness. So that was, and I think that was October or November of last year of 2021, right?
Yes. Yep.
So we started, and it'd been 2 years in the planning when we had started looking at this. So I remember you came back to me the end of October and said, do you want to do this? And I said, yeah, I do. I think this is something, if it happens, and there was still a lot of uncertainty because of COVID. You remember so we can talk about the logistics in a minute, but the only way you can get there is flying to Iceland and then from Iceland into Greenland. That's the only way you can get there. And both Iceland and Greenland had shut down because of COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I do. When we started planning, we were talking about all the COVID restrictions and what we needed to do to make sure that we had all that covered. But then by the time we actually got down to May, things didn't lift. And so I was really happy for that. It creates a lot less stress for travel when you don't have to worry about all the restrictions.
So there was even maybe like in February, remember we had a discussion with the team in Greenland in February, and there was still this uncertainty. Will it happen or not? Will the country shut down? Will Iceland shut down? So it wasn't just Greenland,
yep.
But you cannot get to Greenland except through Iceland. And so it was critical that both Iceland and Greenland were both functional. And there was some uncertainty about that even as late as February.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, I planned a lot of trips for you, for other executives. I've done a lot of travel planning, but I have to say, I went into this Greenland trip very naive. I didn't really understand truly what this guide company would be taking you on. But as we got closer and closer to you going, and I started doing the research on what you're supposed to take and what you have to have, and like what they're going to be doing with you, I did quickly learn that I mean, these guides are super skilled guides, but it
Goodness.
is really an extreme sport.
It is. So I asked you this, I think right before I left, I said to you, what was this the most challenging trip you've ever worked for me? What was your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I think the most challenging trip, and I think it would be worth going back and probably reliving the Africa trip, because that really
Yeah.
was a wonderful trip that me and Cassie kind of together planned for you. But that one was difficult just because there's so many vaccines and immunizations and things that you have to consider before going into Africa. So I would say that would probably took me a little bit more time. But this Greenland one, I mean, it probably was the best one I've planned. I learned so much about the countries. I learned so much about what they do in those countries, the guides, like your preparation for this trip was not just like pack my bags and go. I mean, it was months and months of training and preparing and planning. So I do think that the Greenland trip was, more comprehensive as far as planning a trip for you.
I mean, I've traveled millions of miles and have done a lot of crazy things. This was the most difficult trip for me to plan for. And I didn't do any of the logistics of it. I just had to show up with my gear. You and Cassie did all of the planning and whatnot. So yeah, just maybe we talk about the planning and training and how that came together, because that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that this Greenland trip isn't for, even like intermediate advanced skiers. Like the training that goes into this trip that, I learned it's really takes a lot of dedication, and it takes a lot of physical training. They emphasize that from the very beginning. They did like a whole checklist, like, are you fit to do this type of thing? So it's not like anybody can do it. I do think it would be important for you to kind of give us an idea of how you prepared for it, because I think it was a big commitment on your part to do.
And I had forgotten about that until you said that they won't just accept anybody in there.
No.
I forgot that you kept asking me, hey, what are some of your what are some of your up and down ski trips? What was some of the most, they ask you, what is the steepest line you've ever skied? What is your mountaineering skill? I mean, I had forgotten that they had asked that so that they could judge, are you in a position to do the skiing? And so remember, we went back and forth on that a lot. I had to write an essay to get in. I forgot about that. And
It's just,
because
they
it was
do
so long
skills,
ago.
they do like a skills assessment.
I forgot that. So it was so long ago that I'd forgotten that I had to write an essay on why I thought I could do this. And we'll bookmark this and come back to it when we talk about the getting there. But I was kind of annoyed with it because I'd never had anybody ask me, what can you ski? And I always, there's a lot of things that I don't do well, but I know how to ski. And I mean, I've been skiing my whole life. I've skied some of the most difficult, steepest lines in North America. And so, I was rattling off all of these lines. And then I remember writing this essay on why I thought I could go in there. The emphasis, though, this was really interesting. We'll come back to this. The emphasis was on the skiing. Remember, it was not on the mountaineering side of it, which I was so ill prepared for. I had no idea. We'll come back and talk about that in a minute.
For
But
sure.
yeah, so you can't, they just won't take anybody. They had to like accept you and do research on you. And you wrote this essay on your ability, your skiing ability. And the focus really was on skiing, which no problem. I had skied every crazy line. They knew all of the lines I'd skied in North America. And so they were like, oh yeah, you're in. The problem that they didn't ask me about my mountaineering skills, which was zero.
Yeah, I know. And that I actually want to hear about that because I saw your pictures and read your posts. And yeah, I mean, it seems like that was a whole other skill set that you had to consider for sure.
So planning for this, as I said, I have done a lot of ski trips. I've skied in Europe. I've skied in Alaska in the Chugach Range and in some crazy lines all over North America and Europe. I mean, I really have skied at Chamonix and, you know, a lot of the famous places in Europe. And I've skied every difficult line in North America. I've skied in the Chugach. So I had prepared and had done some crazy trips before where I had to schlep a lot of gear into these places. I'd never done anything like this. So once they accepted me in, they had sent you a list, remember, of here's the gear.
Yep, a checklist.
This was all the gear that you must have. You must have this or you're not going out into the backcountry. And so you had said, I can remember you said, hey, let's go through this gear list. What the hell is all of this stuff? What is this? And so I was like, yeah, okay, I've got this. I don't have this. Part of the challenge that we had was because of COVID and the supply chain, it took me months to get some of that gear that I had to have for this, especially the mountaineering gear. I had to order it. And then luckily I got a lot of it going into the last part of March, April. But if you remember, I started ordering that gear probably in November I mean, it took me 6 months to get some of that gear, if you remember.
I do remember. I do.
So the planning of it wasn't just, getting all of the stuff together and going. It was, here's the gear. I had to order it. And then I waited for a long time to get it. And the other thing that was interesting was because the Wasatch is so different from Greenland, the mountaineering and the skiing that I do here, it's nothing like Greenland. And I had not anticipated that at all. So I ordered this stuff and I was thinking, whatever, I'm not going to use this. It's probably for their insurance even, or this is safety gear that I'll never use. That was shocking that it was. And I was so ill prepared for the mountaineering side of it. You asked me about the training. So let me set this up. I mean, the skiing that I really love, and you know this, a lot of people that know me well know that my kind of skiing is in the backcountry. I love these steep lines. I love doing a long skin and ski is what we call it. And so for those of you that are not familiar with this, and Summer, you'd never heard of this before I told you about this.
Yeah.
And you've lived here your whole life. But this is my kind of skiing. And this technology isn't new, and the technique isn't new. It's I actually am a telemark skier. Usually I didn't telemark on this, and I'm so glad I didn't. I had Matt Spenceley, who I've become close friends with him, and it leads this group, said, do not bring telemark skis. But telemark started about 1,000 years ago in Telemark, Norway. And this is where my ancestors are from. All of my Scandinavian ancestors originally came from Norway. I do have Danish Scandinavian ancestors as well. But where the skiing comes from, and where I always tell people it's in my DNA, came from Norway in this Telemark region. And my ancestors left Norway, they went to Iceland, and I had family in Iceland there for 400 years before they came to America and came to the Wasatch. But they also, what I think is really interesting, which I found out last year, is that they spent a lot of time in Greenland too. It was a Norwegian, and it was an Icelandic settlement. And then Norway owned and occupied Greenland for probably 1,300 years, that Norway had Greenland until they lost it to Denmark. We can come back and talk about that in a minute, which I think is interesting. But this technique that started 1,000 years ago or more, they even think it was older than that. It started with the Scandinavians using skiing as a form of transportation. And to get around the snow, they invented skis. And it was great on the flat. It was awesome on the downhill, right? But what happens with the uphill? If you were trying to navigate the uphill, it's a challenge. What they found was if they took animal skins, and usually they would take bear or they would take seal if they were on the coast, and take strips of animal skin and strap it to the ski. And what they found is that because animal skins are directional, that it would hold the ski on the uphill. And if you've ever pet a dog, you know that you can pet the dog one way, but not the other. So they would put the skins on the skis in that direction so that the skin would hold the skis in the uphill. And like I said, this technology, in fact, just a few weeks ago, they found it had been frozen for 1,300 years, is what they had estimated, a ski with skins on it from 1,300 years ago. So that's how old that technology is. I mentioned about 1,000 years ago, this ski technique of telemarking, which is that your toe is held on a ski, but your heel is free. And in this part of Norway, they invented a turn where you could ski steep lines, bending your downhill knee in this turn. So I have, for years, have been trying to, I was this amazing alpine skier. I've been trying to learn telemark, and I'm very good. I mean, most of my skiing, even on the very steep lines, is telemark. But this technology is that your heel is free and your toe is fixed. And with the skins on your skis, it will allow you to go up really steep uphill. So today, most backcountry skiers ski in what's called alpine touring, or we abbreviate it AT skiing, where you can lock your ski in once you're at the uphill, take your skins off your skis, and then ski down just like you ski at a resort, ski in an alpine run. So in the Wasatch, what I love is, and my favorite kind of skiing is backcountry skiing, where I skin, where you put your skins on your skis and you will trek to the top of the mountain that way. So it's like hiking with your skis on. And even with that in a steep incline, those skins will hold you so you don't go backwards. It's like you're hiking uphill with your skis on and those skins. And I've done a lot of the famous backcountry routes in Utah, most of the mountains in the Wasatch, and I love it. It's my favorite thing to do in the world. So not only did they talk about your skiing ability and this is your gear that you need, but they said you need to be able to skin I can't remember what the metric was, but it was equivalent to like, can you skin 2,500 vertical in 2 hours? I think that was the cutoff. That means that you're going to go uphill 2,500 feet uphill in elevation in 2 hours. Does that make sense? So if you're along the Wasatch, for those of you that have been here and have visited the Wasatch, to give you some sense of what this means is that Snowbird at the bottom of the tram to the top of the tram, that's a very famous ski route. That's about 2,500 vertical. In northern Utah, where I skin a lot, the bottom of the gondola at Snow Basin to the top of Needles, that's about 2,500 vertical. That gives you some idea of what they want to see. Can you skin 2,500 vertical feet in 2 hours or less? Mm-hmm. So to get there, there's a lot of training. And it was, for me, which started even back in 2021, I was training for this. I did more uphill last year, if you remember, getting ready for this than I did this ski season for a lot of reasons. But I was doing a lot of, and during COVID, I did a lot of uphill. I would finish work. I would get to the ski hill about 5:30 or 6 and go up. Or there were a lot of times that I would do skin in the dark. I'd be on the hill about 4 a.m. and then be back in the office at 8:30 or 9 every day.
I do.
So there was a lot of training for this, anticipating that I was going to be doing this trip.
So I'm so curious, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but no. Did you find that when you actually got there and had to do this uphill skinning, like, was it what you anticipated? Was it harder? I mean, like, I'm envisioning it, and I'm not a skier, and I certainly could not climb a hill on skis, but were you prepared? Did you feel prepared to do it? Was it hard? I mean, how was that?
So you hear about these stories of kids that grow up, they're the very best in academia, and then they go to Harvard and they're like mediocre or like low under their classmates. They look around and there's these incredible kids at Harvard that are all the same amazing kind of kids they are. That's kind of my experience when I got there. I really went into this. You asked me a couple of times, are you ready for this? Do you feel like you're ready? And I said, oh yeah, I'm ready. There'll be nothing that I can't tackle. And so going in, I was thinking, okay, this will be whatever they throw at me, I'm ready for. I was ready to ski anything and had skied some unbelievable lines. Well, when I get there, I'm paired with IFMGA certified mountain guides. And so most people, even along the Wasatch, they've never heard of this. I didn't know much about, I'd heard about the certification because I'd spent some time in Europe. I'd been in Chamonix and in Bavaria and other places in the Alps. So I'd heard of these guides, but what I didn't understand is this is like a master's degree in mountaineering, and skiing is just a tiny piece of this. If you live in an alpine country, so Italy, Switzerland, France, Germany, any of the traditional Alp countries, for you to guide anyone, regardless of what it is, you have to have this certification, and it's 6 years to get it. And it is crazy. To be an IFMGA guide is like, it really is. It's like a master's degree 6-year degree in mountaineering. And these guys are climbing Mont Blanc, and they're climbing the Eiger and all of these famous routes, but the focus is mountaineering. So already, like, I felt like I'm outclassed. Oh my goodness, this is crazy. And yes, it was so different than what I had anticipated. I'd never done a lot of the mountaineering that I had done, had to do on this trip. This skinning was so different. We can talk about that in a minute. I'm sure you've got questions on that. Mm-hmm. The skiing was incredible. I mean, all of the skiing was over 50-degree slopes. So when you think about a 45-degree slope, that is, that's the kind of skiing that is the most difficult skiing in North America, like Corbett's and the Christmas Chutes and some of these famous Regulator at Snowbird, High Rustler at Alta, some of these famous runs that they're not 50 degrees, and they are the steepest runs in North America. So everything that we did there was over 50 degrees in pitch.
Wow. Well, I mean, I am so curious to know, like, I know that you traveled like different time zones. I know that you were on like, you flew most of the time. I think you had like a little bit of a stay in Iceland. You got there. I'm sure you were like sleep deprived. I'm pretty sure you were not sleeping for days. And then I know you get there, you're paired with these people who I do remember seeing the names that they're coming in from different countries. And I'm wondering if at any point, did you feel like, were you scared? Were you so nervous?
Going into it, I wasn't nervous at all. Like I said, I think I was overconfident and just didn't know what to anticipate. And then even most of the first day, I was
fine.
It was until we got to the mountaineering piece, and so we can come back to that. So yeah, getting there, just going back to the logistics. Remember, they said your pack, you're required to bring all of this equipment, but your pack couldn't weigh more than a certain amount. I think you could have 2 bags, and they had to be under 50 pounds, under 40 pounds. You could have 2 bags with all of your gear, your skis, everything could not weigh more than 80 pounds combined.
Yes.
So getting the gear all together, putting it in my avalanche pack, and just getting the gear there was painful. So I flew from Salt Lake to Seattle, and then Seattle to Iceland. And I got to Iceland and then had an overnight in Iceland, and then flew from Iceland to Greenland the next morning. Luckily, I got to hook up with my guide in Iceland. He was so great, and he is an incredible mountaineer, and I learned so much from him, Rick Marchant, that he lives in Chamonix, which is the mountaineering mecca, I think, for Europe. And this was what started it. Remember, he had just, I told you this, that week, he had been racing in this crazy mountaineering race. And I can't remember the French PDQ is it PDQ?
I'll have to look, because I remember you sent me the article, like he was featured. Yeah, like it was a big deal. He won.
Yeah, and unbelievable. So not only he had it's the patrol skimo race, which is this brutal race in France that he had just finished the race, ran to the airport, gets on a plane, lands in Iceland, and then he and I meet in Iceland. And so we got to spend a few minutes or a few hours that evening talking about skiing and his race. And he'd never been to the Wasatch. And so he'd asked me a lot of questions about the Wasatch, which I thought it was a great way to get acquainted with him. And we built this social rapport before we started, which I think was very helpful, because once we were on the mountain, we were a team, and we really, I think having that social connection and friendship, and he knew some of my skills. I think he was even looking back on this. I didn't realize it at the time. He wanted to know like what kind of skiing I did, what could he anticipate for that next week. And he was asking me some of these questions. And I was really, like I said, really confident going into it. He's an IFMGA guide, obviously, and he's a legend in Europe. He is one of the top guides of Europe. Interestingly, a lot of these mountain guides, the ski and mountaineer experts, they're leaving Europe and they're coming to Greenland and moving there. And it is the place for this kind of skiing and mountaineering.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you saying that you met the people, that the three other guys and this Rick. And yeah, I remember me thinking, okay, these are like his people. I think
they are. They were
his people.
It was I mean, that's all these guys want to talk about is skiing and mountains and what did you do? And I was asking them a lot about their history and mountaineering, and they were asking me about the Wasatch and what I was doing. That even at night, this is what's funny, is every night we were together for 10 days, and at night they still wanted to talk about skiing, and so did I.
Yeah, I was like, these are his people. So
sure.
I don't know if we've covered all of that. I kind of want to talk about the actual trip, because I did see some pictures, and I remember you didn't have Wi-Fi all the time. You were like in back. I mean, maybe tell us a little bit about like where you started, because I know you basically got off the plane and started skiing. So maybe kind of start us through your actual 10-day trip a little bit.
Okay. Well, and what's interesting about Greenland is, which I didn't know much about it, Greenland is a huge country. I mean, they call it an island, but it's like 4 times the size of Texas. It's like the size of Western Europe. It is almost the size of America minus a few of the Western states. It is huge.
Yeah.
It is such a big country. There's less than 60,000 people in the whole country. So if you think about a fairly small town of 60,000 people living in a country the size of Western Europe, 4 times the size of Texas, there's nobody there. Most of the inhabitants are Inuit. And what's really interesting, so the other thing that I did in preparation, just culturally and wanted to be prepared, was I've been reading the sagas, the Icelandic sagas, and the Icelandic sagas are sort of like the Greek myths. They taught most of them are based on facts and history, but then there's some, the Icelandic gods, and there's a lot of, fables in there too. Well, so in preparation, I read the saga of Leif Erikson going to Greenland. And so he was there on that southeast side of Greenland where I was. And so I thought that was interesting as well. The history of Greenland is there have been inhabitants there for thousands of years, but really the permanent residents didn't start until maybe like 800 AD when my relatives, the Icelandic people, they were exploring Greenland and came and settled in southeastern Greenland, close to where I was. Then what was interesting is that the Inuit people came from Alaska and Canada about 300 years later and started populating and settling Greenland. So really it was, maybe 1300 years, 12 or 1300 AD, I mean, when the Inuit people really started setting up these little villages. Where we were on the southeast side of the country, it's very, very sparsely populated, mostly Inuit people, Inuit villages that live like they did over 1,000 years ago, or 800 years ago. They still eat polar bear. They still get around on dog sleds. It's one of the few nations that are really still dependent on dog sleds to help them get around. They fish. They have kayaks that they make. Still today, I mean, the Inuit people really, for the most part, live like they did 1,000 years ago. So it was interesting flying into this little Inuit town. The airport was built by the Americans during the Cold War. Greenland was a site for the early warning systems for the ICBM missiles. Mm-hmm. And so the U.S. Department of Defense did set up a few of these little airports. And when I say airport, there's no tarmac, there's no runway. It's just you land on gravel and ice. And so there's this little tiny airport where you land. And you take this tiny plane into this little area. And I can remember getting off the plane and just being overwhelmed with this amazing scenery. It was so incredible. It was, I'd seen a lot of beautiful mountain ranges in my life, and have skied a lot of these places. I'd never seen something that just for miles and miles, it was these incredible mountains for as far as you could see, all snow-capped. And I could see why when Rick was telling me that a lot of the mountaineers are coming from Europe to Greenland. Imagine seeing the Matterhorn, or Mont Blanc, these really famous mountains in Europe where all these mountain guides are, and you land and you see one Matterhorn after another for as far as you can see. And it was like emotional and overwhelming to land and see this.
Yeah, I mean, as I was kind of keeping in touch with you and I was trying to track like what you were doing, I was myself really impressed because I don't know much about Greenland, but it's beautiful and it looks like there's nobody ever there. So it really did look like you were on the mountains by yourself. And I think I used the word serene because to me, it just was beautiful. It was very serene.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's nobody skiing. I mean, there's only, like I said, there's 55,000 people that live on the whole island. In Southwest Greenland, there may be 2,000 or 3,000 people. This town where I was at, there was 100 people.
Yeah.
And they're not skiing, they're fishing and hunting polar bear.
Yeah. So, I mean, tell us like kind of just maybe quickly that I want you to illustrate kind of what your days look like, and how you navigated through the hills of Greenland, like through the mountains.
So what was interesting is we land and Rick says to me, Rick, my guide, we became really close, and he said, okay, put all your gear on. We're going to skin from the airport to the village. So we started out, everybody's talking about this. The other two members of our group had also never been to Greenland, and they had done a lot of mountaineering in Europe. They were also IFMGA guides, and we were all just so excited to be there. So we put our gear on, we put our skis and skins on, we skin to the village. And this beautiful village in the middle of the nowhere with these incredible views of the ocean and the sea ice and these amazing mountains. And it was so incredible. So what our days look like, and I think, you'll find this interesting. Every day, so day one, which I like I said, I didn't really know what to anticipate. I was so excited. It's been 20 years in the making. I was up and ready to go. And by the way, because we're north of the Arctic, it's light day round around the clock now. It would start getting dark about 10 o'clock. And then the sun was up about 1:30 in the morning.
Wow.
So I got up a few times that first night I was there. I thought it was like 9 or 10 in the morning. It's 1:30, 2 o'clock at night. And it's bright sunlight, sunshine, ready to go. So you can get going as soon as you want. So we got up, got our gear on. I put my pack on. Most mornings we do what I call skijoring. Skijoring is also an old tradition where the Scandinavian countries would take horses and you'd have a rope and you'd hold on to the rope with your skis on, and the horse would go out as fast as you could go. And they'd have these races with the horses pulling the skiers across this land. It's called skijoring. It's still in a lot of European countries, Scandinavian countries, it's still a thing. Well, we would skijor across the sea ice every morning, and we'd get up. It's about -10 every morning. And they would have these snow machines, snowmobiles, snow machines hooked up to these ropes, and they would pull all of us holding onto the rope 10 miles to where the trailhead was across the sea ice. So we would go into these fjords. If the fjord was frozen, they would take a snow machine and we would go across the sea ice. So underneath you is the ocean, and you would be pulled across the sea ice to the trailhead into these fjords. And then you would start your skin. So almost every morning we would either get in a boat with all of our gear and then take a boat into the fjords, or we would do this skijoring over the sea ice, which was just in of itself was crazy. To hold on for 10 miles of being pulled across the sea ice was crazy. And there were a lot of mornings, I didn't realize this, but there were a lot of mornings that the ice would move up and down. It was
scary.
Yes. I didn't know this, but the sea ice goes up and down with the tides. And so if you're at high tide, the ice will be high. If you're at low tide, then where you may have skied right off and into the trailhead, you may come down and it's low tide in the afternoon, and the ice is 20 feet down, and you have to climb down to get to the sea ice. And then every day you were pulled back, we did skijoring back another 10 miles back to wherever our camp was. We also did, and we can talk about this in a second, but we also did this backcountry where we were in the middle of nowhere and stayed in a hut for 2 days as well. So totally out of range of anything. So we'd start at the trailhead. We put our gear on. We started skinning. I'm loving this. And the skinning is going really well. We skinned for about probably 4 or 5 hours, and it was a good gradual climb. Then we went into this canyon and started heading up this mountain. And Rick said, we're going to go to the top of this. So imagine being on a 50-degree climb with your skins on. And part of the trick of this is that you have to anticipate anything. You have to anticipate the weather change. And the weather every day is so different. If the wind's blowing, that's going to change your route because the snow will freeze and thaw based on where the sun is, what time of day you're going to hit it. Is there wind? Are there clouds? And so all of the decisions, we really didn't know where we were going to, what the summit was going to be every day because we had to look at the weather that day. And then once we had a plan, then we would head up the mountain based on when we thought the snow was going to be frozen for the up and thawed for the down. And you had to hit that just right. There was so much atmospheric science in this that I knew nothing about. And because of our weather in the Wasatch, we don't do that. We never ski on this kind of stuff. So we would started heading up this hill that was crazy steep in a skin track, roped in. So we would all rope in. And then when it got so icy and steep, then we would put ski crampons on. And in French, they call it crouteau. And crouteau is knives in French. And you would put these crampons on your skis that would fit over the bottom of your boots with these knives. That's why they call it crouteau, that would stick in the snow. So there was a point where it would be so steep and so icy, your skins would no longer hold. So to give you some idea of how ill prepared I was for that, I've never used crouteau before. I'd never been for the most part, I'd been on some steep, icy stuff, but usually I could navigate it. This, you had to put your crouteau on, rope in, and keep going until you couldn't do it until your skis would not hold with your crouteau, your knives sticking down. Then you had to take your skis off on the hill. You dig out the mountain with your shovel. You would make a platform while you're trying not to fall down the mountain. Put all your gear there, take your skis off, put your skis on your backpack, put regular ice crampons on your ski boots, and then you'd go up another 300 to 400 feet, roped in, everybody roped in with an ice axe and a pole, roped in, like barely going up this mountain. So it was so steep, so icy that you had to have an ice pick in, a pole to hold you from falling, and the whole team was roped in.
Stressful, very stressful.
I was so ill prepared for any of that. So we wore a harness. We wore a regular climbing harness, like rock climbing harness. We rope in, all of us rope in, skin with your crouteau on until it got too steep. Then you take all your gear off, you put it on your back, you'd put the ice crampons on your boots, and then mountaineer all the way to the top. And you asked me if I was ever afraid. I did not like that. And those guys they were joking with me. They loved it. They're mountaineers. They love it. That's their thing. They love that. But I had not done, there had never been a time when I'd been doing that kind of mountaineering. I've done ice climbing before. I had never had to go up with a 50-pound pack with your skis on your back, an ice pick roped in, and then you used a pole to kind of give you some balance as you make your way up the mountain.
I did not know it was that intense.
And what's funny is that these guys all thought well, geez, you're skiing these crazy lines along the Wasatch. They don't understand how accessible the lines are here along the Wasatch. I don't have to do that crazy mountaineering to get into those lines.
Yeah.
So I'd never done it before. And I was totally a disaster. I learned so much about the weather, anticipating the weather. I learned so much about the mountaineering side of it that I didn't know much about. And they were all joking with me. Okay, it's time to boot pack. And they knew I hated it. And they would joke with me about that every day. So most days we did 2 or 3 of those ascents based on the weather, where we were, the direction of the sun, and how fast we thought we could do this. And so that was the other piece of it. Was the first day I didn't realize these guys are like, listen, you have to be on the top at 2:00, or you're going to be in a dangerous position skiing down because it'll freeze back over. We have to be on the top at this. We had to meet those deadlines.
Yeah.
And we could not miss. We could not. If he said a couple of times, guys, if you don't think you can get to the summit by 3:00 or whatever the time was that he decided we needed to be to the top, let's turn around, because you're going to be in a dangerous situation. That happened one day. We skied off a line, and one of the other members of our team in our party skied off this pitch that was frozen and went all the way to the bottom. Luckily, there was no rocks or cliffs or anything where he could get hurt. It was just an ice field, but it was a 50-degree ice field, and he went for I'm not exaggerating when I say he went for a mile on his back all the way to the bottom.
I'm envisioning you with these 4 people, and I'm envisioning how dependent you really do become on each other. I guess it's like an independent feeling of, like reaching a goal that you've never done, but then at the same time, you probably are so reliant on each other to be successful.
Yeah. So on the first day, like I said, we pulled out into the trailhead. Things were going really well, and I felt really strong. And about 4 or 5 hours into the skin, we start heading up this big 50-degree pitch. Which it was really new, and especially the mountaineering side of it. What we would do is carve out a piece of the mountain and make it flat, and using our avalanche shovels, make a platform on this very steep pitch where we could put our backpack and all of our gear. We put on these crampons, put all of the gear, including our skis, in the backpack. We had an ice axe in one hand and a ski pole in the other for balance. We roped in, and we just kept going up this mountain. And it was, I think the hardest part was just not anticipating or not having some idea of what was ahead. And I really did better in the subsequent days where I knew the questions to ask. And I really had developed a great relationship with this team where I knew what their capabilities were and they knew what mine were. And we worked together to ensure everybody got to the top of the mountain. So think about now you're carrying all of this gear on your pack. Your skis are in the pack, and you're roped in. You're in a climbing harness, and you're roped in all together, climbing to the top of this very steep mountain that was about, the mountaineering side of it was probably a good 500 feet of vertical. I mean, took us every day when we started doing the mountaineering side of it, and took the skins off and climbed to the top. It would take us a good 2 hours, hour and a half to 2 hours, or sometimes more, depending on how
technical the climb was to get up there. I think what was interesting is that even the other guides that were with us, and they were very experienced mountaineers, as I said. I think having some sense and expectation of what was going to happen, they had never been to Greenland either, really helped us in all of the other days and helped us prepare mentally. This is what we were going to do. We had a plan every day. And that really changed the focus and how the days were approached. I mean, for me especially, I knew that, okay, we're going to do a good 4 or 5 hours of skinning before we get to the mountaineering part. I knew what to do then, and every day just increased my skill set and capabilities as I worked with these incredible individuals. It made me a better mountaineer. The skiing part of it was incredible. I mean, I've skied a lot of lines in my life, and I've never skied anything so steep. And Rick, our guide, was so good at making sure that the ski conditions were perfectly skiable. And as I had previously mentioned, if it was icy, you could be in trouble, and you may tumble off the pitch. And a lot of these routes had cliffs and rocks exposure on the route, and so it was so critical that we timed this perfectly so that the snow was set up in a position where we could ski it. And what I equate it to is if you're a skier in the Wasatch, we call this Wasatch corn, and it's where the spring snow will thaw just enough that it's almost like a soft powder, even if it has not snowed for several days. It's kind of what we were skiing on throughout the 10 days we were there. It was really remarkable. It was incredible. Every day it was a real test of my strength and endurance and courage. And I've done a lot of endurance sports, and I've done several Ironman triathlon competitions. I've done over 30 big triathlons, and I can never remember an event where I was doing this kind of endurance for so long. I mean, I was burning 5,000 to 7,000 calories every day. So you can imagine that. I mean, that's more than a marathon. We were doing over a marathon day, the equivalent of that in the skin and skiing and the mountaineering in between.
Well, I have a couple questions around that. Like I want to ask you about, I kind of, saw this trip at the beginning as more of like a pleasure / leisure trip for you, kind of. But now that I'm actually hearing how it actually went down, I'm wondering, with the other members of your team, I would think that there would be this expectation that you each have to pull your own weight. And, if one person doesn't pull their own weight, I'm sure that affects the whole entire team. So was there a time where you felt like that was an issue of people pulling their own weight to like make the whole team successful? And was there any like hard feelings or hardships or negativity or things that you guys had to get past as a team? Or were you guys pretty much all on the same page with expectations and how we get through it each day?
Oh, I think no. We all became very close, and we knew that it was essential that we work together. I never remember there being a time when there was dissension in the group ever. We really had a lot of, I think, admiration for what everybody was doing and how challenging this was. And one of the things that was interesting, you may remember this, a few years ago, there was this video that went viral, and it was the Cleveland Clinic that they did this training for all of their members of their staff, the doctors and the nurses and the allied health professionals, trying to teach these individuals empathy. And they put out this video and of real people, patients and their families. And the training was trying to understand what they're going through and what they're feeling. And in the end, what was determined was, you have no idea. And you may think that somebody is doing great. And in reality, at the bottom of these clips, there would be a caption that would say, this little girl's going to see her dad for the last time, or this is a new father. And you can imagine a lot of the scenarios in the Cleveland Clinic, in these hospitals, were terrible things. And so they would put these captions up. And I had this interesting experience at the end of the trip where I had such admiration for Rick and the other members of this team. And we were all skinning back to the airport and just kind of reminiscing about the week and some of the ups and downs. And what I heard, these guys up finally were telling me, we were on this pitch and I was really afraid looking down it. And we were amazed that you dropped into the chute and just went and did it. And, I was in such awe being with these great mountaineers, and had so much admiration for them that it was fantastic to hear them share their experiences and feelings, where I was just amazed that a member of our team said to me, I remember that time that you asked that we all clip in and rope together, and it was a really steep pitch, and this guy said, I really appreciated you speaking up and saying, why don't we all rope up? And because he was afraid of tumbling down the mountain as well.
Yeah.
I think, I learned a lot about myself. I learned about what kind of strength and courage and endurance I really have. And it was tested every day. And that went on for 10 days. Some of the things that, maybe some of the life lessons that I pulled out of this that I'll never forget is that that first day I was having a hard time. And in fact, let me share something incredible. We were on this steep pitch. And as I said, I've never done this kind of transition before in this mountaineering. I put my pole into the side of the mountain, and the pole blew over and tumbled to the bottom. And I was so embarrassed, and I was dying because I'm with these great guides, and I'm sure that they were just rolling their eyes. And it was a tough day. That first day, not anticipating, not knowing, not that, just the uncertainty of what I had ahead, I think was difficult. And the next day I was great. And I think part of it too was, like I said, really learning the strengths and weaknesses of this team. I think when Rick saw me ski and knew that I could ski anything that he gave me, gave him some confidence to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to push forward. Every night we talked about skiing. We talked about the day, and we talked about what went well and what didn't. And I learned to ask the right questions too. I was so excited about this trip and so excited to the skiing. I really was not asking the right questions of Rick, my guide. I was in the days that followed, I knew exactly what to ask. What's the plan? What time are we going to leave? How much skinning are we going to do before we start transitioning into this mountaineering? I was also focusing on what this beauty around me, and focusing on helping the team. And that first day was really, I think it was tough for everyone. And, poor Rick had just finished this incredible race. He said he was so tired getting off the plane the next day, starting this big adventure for 10 days. And so the other thing that happened on that first day, which was really interesting, was Rick pulled me aside and said, I want to go through your pack. And he just started pulling stuff out of my pack and saying, nope, you're not taking this tomorrow. You're not doing this. Yep, we need this. And changed out my crampons, which helped me so much for the rest of the trip. And so having that kind of leadership and compassion and making sure that the entire team is focused and well-informed was really huge.
I don't know Rick, but I'm assuming that he's had, years and years of training, not only in the actual expedition part of it, but almost in leadership, because I do think that in order to kind of rally those people together to be on the same page, he must have been someone that had good leadership. Otherwise, I can see there being like internal issues with the four if there was not a good leader.
Absolutely. And he made us better. He gave us guidance, but never said this, no, we're not doing this. Or we would build a plan every day, and we did it. Every day we completed our objectives, and it was a lot. It was, some days 10,000 vertical. That is a huge day. And we would leave oftentimes at 7 a.m. and get to our destination at 7:00 at night. 10 to 12 hours of skin mountaineering and skiing. That is a lot. And and then every night I would just crash out. It's been a long time, as you can imagine, me sleeping on a floor in just a sleeping bag for almost 2 weeks. I can't remember the last time that happened. I guess I was probably in my early 20s when I did that. Probably about the same age as these other guys that I was with on this trip. I mean, that was the other thing that I felt like, I was 20 years older than the other members of this team, and I wanted to ensure that that I wasn't holding them back, and I think we all developed this mutual respect for each other. Even though I was 20 years older than these guys, I was out skiing them on the descent. They were better on the uphill than me, but I could out ski them on the downhill.
What did it look like during how would you sustain your energy? I'm thinking how did you sustain the energy to do all of that? Like, what were you guys eating? What were the requirements for you to have enough energy to get through a 12-hour day like that?
I lost over 10 pounds. And I think it was even more because by the time I was able to weigh myself, I'd already had eaten a bunch of junk. But I think, so we'd have these big meals at night. We would have a breakfast in the morning that was usually granola and some Greenlandic bread or some kind of a bread. And then we would skin 2 to 3 hours without stopping. In our avalanche packs, we would pack cheese and some hard meats, and then like nuts, and we would have a big bag of just snack food. And so what we would do is we would skin for at least 2 hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours. we would stop and have a drink and eat something. After about 6-7 hours, we would usually have the cheese and meat. And a couple of times we had these wraps. We would cut meat and cheese in a flour wrap or a grain wrap and just eat that. But it was pretty basic and it was quick. I mean, a lot of times it was 10 to 15 minutes just stopping to eat, and then we would keep going. It was really all of it. The stopping, everything was predicated on when do we need to make that downhill? When do we need to make the uphill? When do we need to make the downhill? And our pace. And so it may be that there were a couple of days I remember that I was thinking, oh my goodness, I really need to eat. I'm at the end of, and having done a lot of this endurance, so many marathons, all of the triathlons I've done, the endurance biking and swimming that I've done, I'm pretty good at monitoring my energy levels, and I know when I'm starting to bonk or hit, out of fuel. And so there were a couple of times that I was thinking, oh my goodness, we've been going hard for a long time and I need to eat, but we couldn't stop because we had to be at the summit at a certain time. And we had to pick up the pace to make sure that we were there or whatever. I mean, sometimes we made it up to the summit, these various summits, quicker than anticipated. And then we would be on the top of the summit waiting for just the right snow conditions to ski down. And those were great. And I've shown you some of the videos that I took at the top of these mountains, and you could just see forever. It was just miles. It was so clear, and you could see for hundreds of miles of just these incredible, beautiful snow peaks in every direction. It was just, it's an amazing place.
Yeah, I guess I never really fully understood that there was such a strategic plan for this to happen every day. I kind of just figured you guys would be, going and doing things not to a plan, just kind of for fun. But it sounds to me like it really was a very structured, strategic day.
I learned so much about, I know a lot about backcountry skiing. I know a lot about avalanche and conditions in the Wasatch and some of the other, in the Chugach and some of the other places that I've skied. Nothing like this. What was really interesting is that because you're so far north in the Arctic, the sun actually is closer to the top of the peaks at the summit than in the valley. And so, interestingly enough, the sun will melt the snow and thaw the snowpack at elevation before it will thaw the valleys. That's how just backwards this is. And so I didn't know that either. I didn't know this is what we were going to do. I've never had to do that in the Wasatch. I've always had this great, if I want to skin at 4 a.m. or if I want to skin at 6 o'clock at night, it doesn't matter. I pretty much know what to expect. And even in the worst conditions, I've never experienced the kind of snow, ice, and working with a lot of this atmospheric science to be in a position to ski the pitch, ski that line perfectly at the right time.
Yeah.
Some of the things I learned about in life and just about myself that I took from this, and now reminiscing with you on some of these amazing climbs that we did. And we would do multiple, a lot of days we would do 3 summits a day, 2 to 3 big summits a day, and then ski those lines. And I think within our business and the work that we do, one of the things that came out of this was anything can happen, right? And you can have a great plan, and you can go into this thinking that you're the best and the most experienced, and you're going to unwrap something in life or in an engagement or in our business, and it's nothing that you had anticipated. And I'm not saying that preparation isn't important. It is. It absolutely is. But having the ability to change direction quickly and understand this isn't going to work, or we need to do something else. Sometimes I see people hold on to an idea, and it's not working. I mean, the plan may have been good, but things have changed. The weather's changed, wind has changed. We had some technical problem that kept us from making the summit, and you have to adjust and change and have that ability to recognize when the plan is no longer working. And so I think that was one of the things that was so evident in this. It was every single day, no matter how good the plan was, we were going to adjust based on what was going to happen, what was happening with the weather, what was happening with the team, what was happening, throughout the day. I think this focus was incredible. When I started focusing on not that, oh my God, I'm tired, I haven't eaten, wow, this is really hard, which was every day, but focusing on this incredible beauty around us, and focusing on helping the team and working together as a team, and really that changed changed my thinking. And all of a sudden it wasn't about, this is a death march every day. It was, this is such an incredible experience. And for me to be here and see this incredible beauty and be with these amazing individuals was just fantastic. I think trying to uncertainty with a lot in life and in dealing with challenges and adversity is always what's difficult. If you know or have some idea of what to expect, and you have done this before, and it's really helpful. I think being honest too. I think one of the thoughts I had when we were doing this last day skin back to the airport, and everybody was sharing these things, and one of the members of the team said, I didn't want to tell anybody, but I had blisters on my feet every day, and I've been nursing these blisters. I was thinking, I wish this guy would have told me that, so that I would have known that these guys around me are human, and I would have had some more empathy for this team. But we were all so reluctant to be honest about what's going on and what's happening. And I think sometimes just in life, we're reluctant to be vulnerable, and especially when you're with these amazing individuals. For me, what was incredible is that them sharing how much they admired what I had accomplished over that 10-day period. And conversely, I had been so enamored with being with these incredible athletes and mountaineers that I wish we would have done more of that throughout those 10 days, because I think it would have even given us a better bond as a group, and that we could have been empathetic to what was going on. Instead, these guys, including me, we were all trying to prove how great skiers we were, and that how tough we were, and how much pain we could endure, instead of saying, this was really hard, or I was afraid, and I've got blisters on my feet that I'm nursing. Just so you know, it would have given us, I think, empathy for each other, and it was a good life lesson, and something that I hope our team and people will think about it. I mentioned this Cleveland Clinic video that was going around, and I encourage people to watch this. It really is amazing. That since I've come back from Greenland, I've been thinking about, what is this individual's caption? What are they going through, and what is it that I don't understand? That trying to be more empathetic, and it was very it was such a very deep and impactful lesson for me.
I think it's kind of true in life for all of us, though. I think we are all kind of afraid of showing our weaknesses, but I do think sometimes in our weaknesses, there's strength for others. And so I do think, even day-to-day stuff, we're so afraid of failure and so afraid of people seeing us weak, but most everybody is probably experiencing some of those same feelings. So I think it's good for you to say, sometimes it's good to share your weaknesses or your failures, because I think that helps to make other people stronger.
I agree. And just shifting your focus. I think in life in general, shifting your focus away from the pain and the, what you're trying to endure to, wow, I'm really blessed. I really have so many temporal luxuries that, you think about kings and rulers for centuries they didn't have the kind of wealth that we have, even no matter where you are in life, and being really focused on what's working, and what how fortunate you are, I think changes your thinking. And it did for me on this trip, and it really has made me think a lot about how fortunate I am, and I think it's made me a kinder person. Spending so much time with the natives of Greenland, spending time with these amazing athletes, and having this great experience that pushed me emotionally and physically, and tested my courage and pushed me to achieve things that I didn't know that I could achieve. It was really remarkable. And I encourage everyone listening to this to find their own path, and push yourself every day. Try to achieve something that is really remarkable, and that is going to get you out of your comfort zone, and test your physical, emotional, and your courage. Every day. I could remember the last thing I thought about every night. I was so exhausted, but I thought, oh my goodness, look what we accomplished today. It was remarkable.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we were able to kind of make a little documentary about this trip, because I really actually think it's going to be something that you're going to look back on for years, and be able to see all the lessons that you learned from this trip. So I'm glad that we were able to do it.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for doing this with me, Summer, and thanks for all your help in making this happen. It was such a incredible experience for me, and something that I'll never forget. And I really appreciated how much you helped me in putting this together, and the logistics, ensuring that I was in a position to do this. And I appreciate you and everything you do for me.
Yeah, thank you.